Don't fight it, you worthless woman. Lauren snarled, slamming a pillow over the pregnant Avery's face right there in the courtroom. Avery's body jolted violently in the wooden chair, her baby bump pushing forward as she clawed at Lauren's wrists, breath vanishing under the weight. The sound that left her throat wasn't a scream, it was a choke. And that's when Logan laughed. Not a nervous laugh. Not disbelief. A full, open, satisfied laugh. He leaned forward in his seat, elbows on his knees, clapping once as if enjoying a show. His eyes shone with amusement while his own wife fought for air. Gasps ripped through the chamber. Someone screamed for security. A woman in the gallery collapsed into sobs. But Logan only laughed harder, completely unaware that the man behind the bench was already rising to his feet. And that in seconds, his entire life would shatter. If you're ready for the justice that follows, subscribe now, and comment where you're watching from. This ending will shock you. The courtroom of Redwood Superior Court had started the morning in routine silence, papers rustling, shoes sliding against polished floorboards, the low murmur of legal procedure. No one expected violence. No one expected bloodless murder in broad daylight. Avery had been seated when Lauren approached. She hadn't seen the pillow until it was already against her face. At first, Avery thought it was a threat. A cruel joke. Another humiliation. Then the pressure came, sudden, ruthless, crushing. Her lungs collapsed inward, panic flooding her limbs as she kicked instinctively, nails scraping skin she couldn't see. Her vision blurred. Around them, chaos erupted. Stop her. She's pregnant. Get the judge. But Lauren didn't hesitate. Her teeth were clenched, eyes wild, arms locked as she leaned in with all her weight. This wasn't anger, it was intent. Clean. Focused. Final. Logan watched it all. The same man who once held Avery's hands through morning sickness. The same man who whispered promises about forever. Now smiling while her life tilted toward silence. Relax, he scoffed loudly to the screaming crowd. She's dramatic. The word echoed. Dramatic. Avery's heartbeat thundered in her ears, uneven, desperate. Stars exploded behind her eyes. Her hands weakened, fingers sliding from Lauren's sleeves, her strength failing in terrifying increments. 3 seconds more, maybe 4, and the room would be watching a death. Then the gavel struck. Once. Not loud yet, but absolute. The courtroom froze in confusion. Lauren faltered for half a breath. The pillow loosened. Air clawed back into Avery's lungs in a violent gasp as security finally surged forward, ripping Lauren away from the chair. Avery folded over herself, coughing uncontrollably, hands locked over her stomach as her body fought to remember how to breathe. Logan stood slowly, still smiling, as if this were all an inconvenience. She tripped into her, he said lazily, straightening his jacket. You people exaggerate everything. The judge said nothing. Not yet. Minutes earlier, none of this had existed. Avery had entered the courthouse alone. No emotional goodbyes. No dramatic declarations. Just a quiet resolve wrapped around fear. She wore a pale cream dress that stretched gently over her pregnancy, one hand always resting beneath her ribs, protective without thought. Her hair was pulled back neatly, no makeup, no armor, just a woman walking into a room filled with people who wanted to erase her. She had not seen Logan in nearly 3 weeks. After the messages. After the threats. After the truth surfaced. But he was impossible to miss now. Tailored charcoal suit. Silver watch. Confidence stitched into every movement. When his eyes found hers across the room, he smiled slowly, as if welcoming her into something she could no longer escape. Lauren sat beside him, leg crossed over leg, lipstick sharp, expression bored. The calm before the strike. The court clerk called the case. Avery stood. Logan stood. The judge entered. And something in the air changed. Not tension. Wait. A presence that didn't announce itself, but demanded attention all the same. Avery felt it immediately. A subtle shift, like the moment before a storm lands. She didn't look at the bench yet. She was still trying to steady her breathing. The assault came without warning. No shouting. No argument. Just sudden movement and darkness. Lauren moved fast. 1 second she was seated. The next she was standing over Avery, pillow already in motion. It was surgical, not emotional. The kind of violence that comes from rehearsal, not rage. And Logan didn't even rise. He laughed. That was the moment the courtroom turned. Not when the pillow fell. Not when Avery began to suffocate. But when her husband enjoyed it. The whispers turned into fury. This is sick. His laughing. My God, his laughing. Even the bailiffs hesitated, stunned by the total lack of humanity unfolding in front of them. The judge did not. His chair scraped softly against the floor as he stood for the first time that morning. Logan hadn't noticed. Not yet. From her chair on the floor, Avery clutched her stomach, breath ragged, tears streaming without sound. Every inhale burned. Every heartbeat felt too loud. She did not look at Logan. She looked at the bench, at the man who had just risen. And in that instant, something inside her shifted, not relief, not hope, recognition. The kind that strikes before the mind understands why. Logan was still talking, still mocking, still untouched by consequence, until the judge took one step forward, and the courtroom held its breath. The judge hadn't spoken yet. His sudden rise cast a shadow across the courtroom, tall, deliberate, commanding, just long enough to make Logan's laughter hitch in his throat. That was where the line held. 2 years earlier, Avery had married Logan believing she had found safety. He was charming then, soft-spoken in public, generous with grand gestures, attentive in every way that mattered at first. The kind of man who opened doors and remembered birthdays, who made vows sound like guarantees instead of promises. Avery had been 26, a junior architect with more talent than confidence, raised to believe patience could soften sharp edges. Logan's edges weren't visible at first. They showed up quietly, after the wedding. First in jokes that landed too hard, then in rules disguised as concern, what she wore, who she met, how late she worked. When she questioned it, he'd smile and say the same thing every time. I just want to protect you. Protection slowly became permission. By the end of the first year, Avery no longer had access to their shared accounts. By the middle of the second, she no longer drove herself anywhere. When she got pregnant, Logan's control tightened like a sealed fist. And then Lauren arrived. Lauren worked in one of Logan's real estate branches, sharp heels, sharper tongue, and a confidence that wasn't borrowed from anyone's approval. Where Avery moved carefully, Lauren moved loudly. Where Avery asked questions, Lauren issued statements. Logan didn't even try to hide the shift in his attention. Within weeks, he was staying out late. Within months, Lauren had replaced Avery in every place that mattered, including his loyalty. Avery found out the truth by accident, an overheard phone call, a name whispered too gently, a laugh she hadn't heard in months. When she confronted him, Logan didn't deny it. He laughed. Then he told her she was replaceable. What Avery didn't know was that Lauren had already been promised more than affection. She'd been promised everything: property rights, offshore accounts, corporate shares, assets Logan had spent years locking away under shell companies and false names. Avery had unknowingly signed several of those transfers during her pregnancy, trusting the man she still believed was her husband. That was when the divorce papers arrived. Not at home. Not privately. In court. Logan demanded full custody of the unborn child, sole ownership of shared assets, and immediate spousal eviction, an aggressive petition so outrageous it stunned even the clerk who stamped it. Avery showed up that morning trembling, exhausted, terrified, but present. Her attorney had advised settlement. Logan had laughed at the advice. Lauren came for blood. That was why she stood behind Avery now with a pillow in her hands. That was why Logan clapped while his wife suffocated. To him, the courtroom wasn't a place of law. It was a stage. And he believed he owned the script. What Logan never bothered to investigate, never paused to question, was how Avery had afforded a private legal defense at all. He assumed desperation, assumed loans, assumed she'd begged someone. The truth was quieter. A week earlier, while Logan and Lauren were vacationing in Monaco, Avery had received a sealed letter from an estate firm she'd never heard of. Inside were documents tied to a family name she hadn't used since childhood. A name her mother had buried along with a past she never wanted Avery to know about. The inheritance papers listed numbers Avery didn't yet understand. And one executor. A judge. The same one now standing slowly behind the bench. Avery didn't know who he was yet. Logan didn't know anything at all. And Lauren, still pressing the pillow tighter, had no idea she was seconds away from turning attempted murder into a public confession. The courtroom had gone nearly silent. Only Avery's muffled gasps remained. And then, the judge finally spoke. The judge's voice cut through the air, low, steady, unmistakably calm. Remove the pillow. Now. For half a second, Lauren didn't move. It wasn't defiance at first, it was confusion. The command didn't sound like it belonged to her. It didn't sound like it belonged to anyone she'd ever feared. Logan was still grinning, still leaning back in his chair like a spectator at a cheap show. Lauren hesitated just long enough for the bailiff to cross the floor in 3 heavy strides. The pillow was ripped from Avery's face. She collapsed forward, coughing violently, gasping as air rushed back into her lungs in broken pulls. Her hands flew to her stomach, shielding her baby as the room erupted in chaos, shouting, scraping chairs, frantic footsteps. Logan finally stood. "What the hell is this?" he barked. "This is a courtroom, not a daycare. Control your people." The judge didn't even look at him. His eyes were on Avery. She was still shaking, still trying to breathe through sobs she hadn't meant to release. The judge stepped down from the bench and crossed the floor himself, slow, deliberate, the weight of authority trailing behind him with every step. When he reached her, he stopped. Then he spoke again, not to the room, not to the lawyers. To her. "What is your full name?" he asked. Avery looked up, confused, terrified, her vision swimming. "Avery. Avery Collins." The judge's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "And your mother's maiden name?" A flicker of memory stirred, old letters, locked drawers, late-night arguments she'd never been allowed to overhear. "Mercer," she whispered. The courtroom shifted. Logan scoffed. "What is this, a trivia game? Can we proceed with my motion already?" The judge turned. For the first time, he looked directly at Logan. And in that moment, Logan's grin finally cracked. "My name," the judge said, his voice no louder but suddenly impossible to ignore, "is Judge Henry Mercer." A ripple moved through the room, quiet at first, then spreading. Lauren's face drained of color. Logan blinked. Once. Twice. "So?" Judge Mercer held Logan's stare. "So Avery Collins is my biological daughter." The word daughter didn't echo. It detonated. The courtroom erupted, gasps, shouts, whispers stacking over each other in shock. Someone dropped a phone. Another person stood abruptly, knocking over their chair. Avery froze. Her breath caught mid-inhale. Her voice broke. "That's not possible. My mother said." "Your mother ran," Judge Mercer said quietly. "With you. To keep you out of reach of the people who would have used you." Logan laughed again, short, brittle. "This is absurd. You can't just stand up and rewrite reality because you feel bad for her." Judge Mercer lifted a single file from the clerk's desk. "I don't rewrite reality," he said. "I enforce it." He opened the file. "This court acknowledges the validity of the Mercer family trust. The executor, myself, has full oversight until formal transfer is completed." Logan's smile vanished completely now. "What trust?" he demanded. "The one that controls every commercial property your holding company leases from," the judge said calmly. "Every loan your expansion relied on. Every credit facility that kept your empire liquid." Logan's face went slack. Lauren took a step back. Avery's attorney slowly stood. Judge Mercer continued, each word measured. "As of 48 hours ago, the sole beneficiary of that trust became Avery Collins. Upon verification of identity, completed moments ago, the inheritance finalized automatically." Logan's mouth opened. No sound came out. "The transfers you coerced her into signing during pregnancy," the judge added. "Nullified under duress protections. Your custody motion." A pause. "Denied." The room was silent now. Logan finally found his voice, thin and cracking. You can't do this. You're biased." Judge Mercer stepped back toward the bench. "No, Mr. Hayes," he said evenly. "I'm finished being quiet." He raised a hand. "Bailiff, place Lauren Wilder under arrest for attempted murder. On record. In front of witnesses." Metal cuffs clicked shut 2 seconds later. Lauren screamed. And Logan, still standing, still frozen, finally understood something he had never once considered. He hadn't been laughing at a powerless woman. He had been laughing in front of the one man who now owned everything he thought he controlled. Logan didn't sit when the cuffs clicked shut around Lauren's wrists. He didn't breathe either, not properly. His eyes tracked her as the bailiff dragged her toward the aisle, screaming his name, swearing he'd fix this, promising revenge through sobs that no longer carried power. The sound faded with every step she took, until the heavy doors swallowed her whole. Only then did Logan realize the room had turned on him. Every stare felt sharp now. No curiosity. No sympathy. Only judgment. He shifted, straightened his jacket, forcing a laugh that cracked halfway out. "This is a circus," he muttered. "A staged distraction. You think one dramatic arrest changes the law?" Judge Mercer regarded him like a problem already solved. "You confuse noise with leverage," the judge said. "Sit down, Mr. Hayes. You're not done here." Logan didn't sit. He turned toward his attorney instead, frantic now, whispering too fast. File an objection. Conflict of interest. Recusal. Emergency appeal. Do something. His lawyer didn't move. The silence stretched. You're just going to stand there. Logan hissed. The attorney finally spoke, carefully. The trust documents were verified through 3 independent financial authorities. The beneficiary transfer is binding. There is nothing to appeal. Logan's throat tightened. Then file for injunction. Freeze the assets. Judge Mercer nodded once. Already attempted. Already denied. Logan's breath turned shallow. For the first time, fear cracked through his arrogance. He stepped backward, shaking his head. You planned this. All of you. This is extortion. A very slight pause. Extortion requires a threat, the judge replied. This is consequence. Logan suddenly bolted for the aisle. 2 security officers moved faster, blocking him before he reached the door. He skidded to a stop, chest heaving. You can't hold me here, he snapped. I haven't committed a crime. Judge Mercer's eyes flicked to Avery for just a moment. Then back to Logan. Obstruction of justice is a crime. So is financial coercion. So is conspiracy to commit violence. Your involvement will be determined shortly. Logan laughed weakly. Involvement? You have nothing on me. At that, Avery's attorney finally stepped forward. We do, she said. She placed a tablet on the clerk's desk and turned it outward toward the court. Audio filled the room. Logan's voice, unmistakable, smooth and careless. If she loses the baby, the divorce gets faster. People only cry for so long. The recording ended. The room didn't move. Logan's face drained completely this time. That's illegal, he whispered. That's fabricated. Judge Mercer leaned forward slightly. It was taken from your own home security system. The one registered in your name. Your mistress provided the access code during arrest. Logan staggered back as if struck. His knees hit the chair behind him. This time, he had no choice but to sit. The man who had strutted into court that morning expecting obedience now looked small, folded inward, stripped of momentum. Judge Mercer's voice remained steady. This court is issuing a temporary criminal hold pending formal charges. Mr. Hayes, you will remain in custody after today's hearing concludes. A quiet murmur crawled through the courtroom. Avery hadn't moved. She sat with both hands on her stomach, breathing slowly now, her entire body still trembling from the violence that had almost taken her life. The shock hadn't faded. It had simply changed shape. Judge Mercer turned to face her again. Are you injured? She hesitated. I don't know. Medical staff moved in gently, checking her breath, her pulse, the baby's heartbeat. The small, steady sound filled the air. Alive. The confirmation rippled through the room like release. Logan heard it too, and something inside him finally broke. What about my child? He croaked suddenly. She's still my wife. You can't take everything. Judge Mercer met his gaze again, colder now. You forfeited the privilege of calling her your wife when you applauded her attempted murder, he said. Then he turned back to Avery. From this moment forward, you and your child are under full court protection. And just like that, with one sentence, Logan lost the only thing left he thought he still owned. The courtroom didn't adjourn. It transformed. What had been a divorce proceeding became a live autopsy of Logan's empire. Phones were already out despite warnings. Reporters in the gallery murmured urgently into concealed mics. Outside the courthouse, sirens began to layer over each other, journalists racing to capture the fallout they could now smell coming. Judge Mercer remained seated. Bring in the financial auditor, he said. A side door opened. A woman in a charcoal suit walked in carrying 3 sealed folders. She didn't look at Logan when she passed him. She didn't have to. State your findings, the judge ordered. The auditor opened the first folder. Over the past 36 hours, all shell corporations tied to Hayes Development Group were legally dissolved under trust authority. All commercial leases expired at midnight. Logan leaned forward sharply. That's impossible. Those contracts run for years. The auditor turned a page. They did, until the trust reclaimed ownership. A murmur rolled through the courtroom. She opened the second folder. All domestic and offshore operating accounts linked to your SSN and EIN have been frozen under federal asset review. Logan stood again, panic ripping through his composure now. You can't freeze 40 accounts in one night. The auditor didn't blink. It was done in 17 minutes. She slid the third folder forward. Every board seat you held has been vacated. Emergency votes were triggered. You no longer control any company that bears your name. Silence crashed into the room. Logan's legs buckled this time. He sank back into the chair as if gravity had quadrupled. No, he breathed. This is theft. Judge Mercer folded his hands. It is repossession. Logan's lawyer leaned in close, whispering no longer. You need to stop speaking. Every word is worsening your exposure. Logan barely heard him. Across the room, Avery watched quietly as the life that once controlled hers fell apart piece by piece. There was no smile on her face. No victory either. Only a deep, stunned stillness, the kind that comes when shock outpaces emotion. Judge Mercer turned to her attorney. Has full custody protection been executed? Yes, Your Honor. Emergency orders are filed and active. Logan's head snapped up. Custody? The child isn't even born yet. The child is already protected, the judge cut in. Because the court recognizes intent as clearly as action. Logan's hands began to shake. Then I want visitation rights, he said hoarsely. You can't erase a father. Judge Mercer held his gaze. You erased yourself. Another door opened at the side of the courtroom. Two men in federal jackets stepped in and approached the bench. Judge Mercer, one said quietly. We've received formal referrals regarding Mr. Hayes' offshore tax structures, labor violations at 3 developments, and coercive financial practices tied to spousal transfer. Logan let out a broken sound somewhere between a sob and a laugh. So you're piling on now, he whispered. The agent met his eyes. No, we're catching up. Handcuffs replaced the courtroom's invisible restraints moments later. The sound of the ratchet echoed louder than it should have. Logan didn't fight. He couldn't. As he was pulled to his feet, his gaze searched the room wildly, for allies, for sympathy, for anything familiar. No one met his eyes. Not his attorney. Not the gallery. Not the woman whose life he had nearly ended. Avery looked at him only once as he passed. There was no hatred in her eyes. Only finality. The doors closed behind him. And for the first time since the pillow had come down over her face, Avery felt the room breathe again. Judge Mercer remained standing now. This court is recessed for medical assessment and protective transfer, he said. All remaining matters will resume under sealed proceedings. The gavel struck. Everything changed. The courthouse hallway felt impossibly quiet after the doors shut behind Logan. No shouting. No cameras. Just the low rush of air conditioning and the soft echo of measured footsteps as Avery was guided into a private chamber off the main corridor. Medical staff moved with calm precision, checking her vitals again, listening to the baby's heartbeat once more, steady, unmarred, alive. Only then did the shaking return. It came in waves, silent and uncontrollable, her hands trembling against her stomach as the reality of what had nearly happened finally reached her. A blanket was placed around her shoulders. She didn't notice. Judge Mercer stood a few feet away, watching without crowding her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said gently, Your mother used to shake like that too. After court. Avery looked up. For the first time since the revelation, she truly looked at him, not as a judge, not as authority, but as a man with history written into his face. The resemblance hit her all at once. The same deep-set eyes. The same tight jaw when emotions pushed too close to the surface. My mother said my father was dead, Avery said quietly. Judge Mercer nodded once. To you, I was. He took a seat across from her, lowering himself slowly, as if making sure every movement felt non-threatening. Before I became a judge, I was an investigator. Financial crimes. Political corruption. Your mother worked as a forensic accountant on one of my largest cases. Avery's breath stilled. The Mercer Trust wasn't built from inheritance, he continued. It was built from seized assets, corporate fraud settlements, government restitutions, whistleblower protections. Powerful people lost everything because of what your mother and I uncovered. Avery's hands tightened in the fabric of the blanket. When the threats started, he said softly, I tried to hide you within secure channels. Your mother refused. She wanted you far from that world, far from me. So she ran, Avery whispered. She disappeared, he corrected. By design. A silence stretched between them, fragile but no longer empty. Why now? Avery finally asked. Why come forward today? Judge Mercer exhaled slowly. Because your name surfaced in a preliminary asset review 3 weeks ago. Transfers. Shell companies. Patterns identical to the criminal enterprises we dismantled years ago. Logan's shadow crossed her mind like a stain. He didn't know what he'd married into, the judge said. But he tried to use it anyway. Avery closed her eyes. And the trust? She asked. It activates upon verification of lineage or death, he said. Your mother's executor filed the final confirmation last week. You became the sole beneficiary 48 hours before today's hearing. Avery gave a small, stunned laugh that cracked in the middle. So I walked into that courtroom thinking I was about to lose everything, and I already owned it. Yes, he said simply. Another silence fell, heavier this time. Do you hate me? Avery asked suddenly. Judge Mercer didn't hesitate. I hate that I listened when your mother told me distance would keep you safer. Her breath faltered. I won the cases, he continued. I lost my family. Emotion finally broke loose, hot and unstoppable. Avery turned her face away as tears spilled freely, no longer constrained by survival. I begged him not to embarrass me in court, she whispered. I begged him not to hurt her. I thought if I stayed quiet long enough, he'd stop. Judge Mercer's gaze hardened, not at her, but at the memory of that morning. Abusers don't stop, he said. They only escalate. A knock sounded at the door. A federal agent stepped inside. Your Honor, protective transport is ready. Private residence is secured. Media perimeter established. Judge Mercer rose. Good. He turned back to Avery. You and your child will be moved to a safe location tonight. Only a handful of people know where. Avery hesitated, then asked the question that had been building since the cuffs closed around Logan's wrists. What happens to him? Judge Mercer didn't soften his answer. He will spend years explaining his choices in rooms far smaller than that courtroom. Avery nodded. And for the first time since the trial began, since the pillow came down, since the laughter erupted, since the world turned upside down, she felt something unfamiliar settle into her chest. Not vengeance. Not triumph. Stability. As she was escorted out through a private exit, the courthouse lights dimmed behind her. But ahead, for the first time in years, the path finally opened. By sunrise, the story was everywhere. It led every news cycle, trended across every platform, broke through paywalls and private forums alike. Headlines didn't bother with restraint. CEO arrested after mistress attacks pregnant wife in court. Judge reveals child as he destroys son-in-law's empire. Attempted murder on the stand. Footage looped endlessly. Lauren's scream as the cuffs closed. Logan's face as the audio played. The judge standing up. The world watched his life collapse in fragments. From the protective residence, Avery saw none of it directly. Her phone had been taken for security reasons. The house was silent except for guarded footsteps beyond the doors and the gentle rhythm of the baby's heartbeat monitor by her bedside. But silence didn't stop the weight of it. Judge Mercer arrived just before noon. He didn't bring files this time. No documents. Just information. They've frozen all public comment from Logan's former board members, he said. Non-disclosure agreements activated. Several are under investigation themselves. Avery sat upright slowly. And Logan? His in federal holding. Arraignment set for tomorrow morning on multiple felony counts, conspiracy, financial coercion, attempted homicide facilitation. More will follow. Attempted homicide facilitation. The words sat heavy between them. What about Lauren? Avery asked. Judge Mercer's expression hardened slightly. She broke during intake. Confessed to the pillow, the planning, the financial incentives. She admitted he promised full control of Avery's marital share if the pregnancy ended itself. Avery closed her eyes. The room felt smaller. She won't see daylight for a long time, the judge added. For the rest of the day, lawyers cycled through quietly, estate attorneys, security consultants, corporate compliance heads. None of them spoke to Avery as if she were fragile. They spoke to her as if she were the axis everything now turned on. Because she was. By evening, the second wave hit. Former partners began flipping. One developer surrendered documents proving Logan had laundered project funds through residential zoning loopholes. Another turned over emails tied to offshore labor violations. Each new revelation stacked onto the last, a chain reaction that didn't slow, didn't soften, didn't miss. Logan's name became radioactive. Stocks tied to his former enterprises collapsed overnight. And still, he said nothing. In holding, he refused interviews, refused statements, refused the plea deal offered in exchange for full cooperation. His silence didn't protect him, it isolated him. The next morning, as the city prepared for his arraignment, Avery went into early labor. It wasn't sudden panic. It wasn't terror. Just pressure. Medical staff arrived within minutes, moving fast but calm. Judge Mercer stood in the doorway and said nothing, his presence steady, grounded, exactly where it needed to be. Hours later, in a room washed with soft light and quiet urgency, Avery brought her child into the world. A daughter. Small, loud, unapologetically alive. When she was placed in Avery's arms, the past finally loosened its grip. The courtroom, the pillow, the laughter, all of it faded as something new took its place. This was the future. And outside that protected wing, just as her daughter took her first breath, Logan took his first steps into a courtroom as a defendant. The cameras were waiting. For the first time in his life, he wasn't the one controlling the frame. Inside the courthouse, the charges were read slowly, methodically, each count stacking higher than the last, the weight of consequence bearing down with formal precision. Logan looked thinner, smaller. He searched the gallery instinctively. Avery wasn't there. Judge Mercer wasn't on the bench either. This time, there would be no dramatic stand. Only process. Only law. When the magistrate asked for his plea, Logan's voice came out rough and unstable. "Not guilty," he said. Outside, the crowd roared. Inside the secured hospital room, Avery held her daughter closer and didn't hear any of it. And that was the most devastating consequence of all. For the first time, Logan was facing the world alone. Logan's trial lasted 11 days. There were no surprises. Only confirmations. Witness after witness took the stand. Former assistants, financial officers, contractors, even one of Lauren's friends who had been present the night the plan was first spoken out loud. The recordings played in open court this time. Not edited. Not softened. Every careless word he'd ever said about Avery, about the baby, about how accidents make paperwork easier echoed through the room. He never looked at the gallery, because Avery never sat in it. She watched nothing. From a private residence overlooking water she had never imagined owning, she learned the outcome through her attorney in calm, factual language, like the weather. Lauren took a plea deal. 28 years. No parole. Logan rejected every deal he was offered. He was found guilty on all major counts: financial coercion, spousal exploitation, conspiracy to facilitate homicide, multiple federal fraud violations. The sentencing hearing took less than 1 hour. When the judge asked if he had anything to say, Logan stood. For a moment, the room believed he might finally understand. He didn't. "This was a setup," he said hoarsely. "A vendetta. I loved my wife. I made mistakes. But this is punishment out of proportion." The judge looked down at him, then delivered the sentence. Life unfolded in numbers after that. Years, freezes, forfeitures, permanent bans from corporate leadership. The exact total didn't trend online because it didn't need to. The footage of Logan collapsing as the gavel struck did that on its own. A week later, Avery visited the ocean with her daughter for the first time. She stood barefoot at the water's edge, the wind tugging softly at her hair, the baby bundled against her chest. Judge Mercer watched from several steps behind, giving her the space she now understood he had always been trying to give. "I used to think power looked like control," Avery said quietly. He nodded. "It usually does, until it doesn't." She looked down at her daughter. "She'll never know him." "She'll know the truth," he said. "At the right time." Avery exhaled slowly. "That's enough." Over the months that followed, the world moved on. Another scandal replaced theirs. Another headline erased their names from the front page. But the long work remained. Trust assets were reorganized, redirected into public interest development, housing, medical infrastructure, legal defense grants for women who were trapped in situations that once looked like Avery's. She never attached her name publicly. She didn't need to. Stability replaced survival. Silence replaced fear. Sometimes, late at night, she still remembered the pressure of the pillow, the sound of his laughter, the way the room had blurred at the edges. But the memory no longer owned her. One afternoon, as her daughter took her first unsteady steps across polished hardwood floors, Avery realized something that surprised her. She hadn't thought about Logan in weeks. Not with anger. Not with dread. Not even with relief. He had become irrelevant. And that, more than the sentence, more than the forfeiture, more than the headlines, was the truest consequence he would ever face. Years later, a young law student would ask Judge Mercer during a lecture on ethics whether justice ever feels complete. He paused before answering. "No," he said. "But it can finally feel finished." On the shore of a quiet property no camera ever found again, a mother lifted her laughing child into the air. And the cycle ended.